A homeless woman stops to help a lost tourist. A simple act of kindness that takes just minutes. But months later, she receives news that will shake her entire world. What started as a chance encounter on a street corner becomes a story of fate, redemption, and a shock so profound that it will completely transform how you see the power of human connection. If you think you know where this is going, think again. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Maya's world collided with Emily's, though neither of them knew it yet. Neither of them could have predicted that this single moment, this brief intersection of two lives, would become the catalyst for everything that was about to unfold. Maya had been living on the streets for almost 2 years. 2 years of sleeping in doorways, of rationing every dollar, of watching people walk past her like she was invisible. 2 years of slow, grinding erosion, not just of her circumstances, but of her sense of self. The city had become her prison and her home all at once. She'd learned to navigate its cruelty, to survive its indifference. Most days she didn't even recognize herself anymore when she caught her reflection in a storefront window. She used to be someone different. She used to have an apartment, a job, people who cared about her. But life had a way of unraveling faster than you could stitch it back together. A medical emergency, lost health insurance, a missed rent payment, then another, then eviction. The descent had been swift and merciless. One moment you're stable, the next you're sleeping on the concrete and wondering how you got here. But on this particular Tuesday, something shifted in the universe. Something that neither Maya nor anyone else could have anticipated. Emily was supposed to be enjoying her vacation. She'd saved for months to take this trip. Her first real break in years. She worked in marketing, spent her days in a cubicle staring at spreadsheets and metrics, dealing with demanding clients and impossible deadlines. She'd earned this. She deserved this. She'd researched the best restaurants, mapped out the museums, planned every moment perfectly. She had a color-coded itinerary on her phone. She'd read reviews, she'd prepared. Except she hadn't planned on getting completely and utterly lost. The GPS on her phone had died, just died, right in the middle of navigation, and she'd made a wrong turn. Just one. But in a city this size, one wrong turn could send you spiraling into an entirely different world. And now, standing on a street corner in an unfamiliar neighborhood, watching the sun start to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement, Emily felt panic rising in her chest like floodwater. Her heart was pounding. Her palms were sweating. She didn't recognize a single street sign. The area had grown progressively rougher as she walked, the storefronts more boarded up, the streets more empty. She was alone, completely alone, with no idea how to get back to her hotel. No idea which direction to walk. No phone to call for help. And the sun was setting. That's when she saw Maya. Maya was sitting on a bench near a shuttered storefront, her few possessions in a worn backpack beside her. The backpack contained everything she owned in the world. A change of clothes, a blanket, a water bottle, a notebook where she sometimes wrote down her thoughts. She wasn't panhandling. She wasn't bothering anyone. She wasn't making eye contact with passersby or holding a sign. She was simply there, existing in the margins of a city that had forgotten her. Invisible, a ghost in plain sight. Emily's first instinct was fear. She hesitated. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Don't talk to strangers. Don't trust people on the street. It's not safe. But desperation overrode caution, and she approached anyway. She had to. She was lost and frightened, And this woman was the only person she'd seen in the last 10 minutes. "Excuse me," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm completely lost. I'm trying to get to the Riverside Hotel. Do you know how to get there?" Most people would have ignored her. Most people would have pretended not to hear. Most people would have looked away, uncomfortable, and hurried past. But Maya looked up, and in that moment, something passed between them. A moment of genuine human connection in a world that had stripped both of them of so much. Maya's eyes were tired, but they were kind. She saw Emily's fear, her vulnerability, and something inside her responded to it. Maybe it was because Maya knew what it felt like to be lost. Maybe it was because she remembered what it felt like to be treated with dignity. Whatever it was, she didn't hesitate. She stood up, slowly, because her joints ached, because 2 years of sleeping on hard surfaces had taken their toll on her body. And she pointed. She didn't just give directions. She walked Emily to the corner and showed her the landmark she needed to look for. She explained the route in clear, careful detail. She made sure Emily understood. She answered her questions. She was patient. She was kind. And when Emily thanked her profusely, pressing a $20 bill into Maya's hand, Maya simply nodded and said, "Stay safe out there." She didn't take the money. She pressed it back into Emily's hand and said, "You might need it more than me. Just be careful where you walk." It took maybe 5 minutes. That was all. 5 minutes out of a lifetime. 5 minutes that would matter more than either of them could possibly know. Emily made it back to her hotel safely. She retraced her steps, found the landmark Maya had described, and navigated back to familiar territory. She walked into the Riverside Hotel as the sun was setting, casting the lobby in golden light. She took the elevator to her room and sat on her bed, her heart still racing from the fear and the relief. But she couldn't stop thinking about the woman on the street corner. She thought about how kind she'd been, how patient. She thought about the sadness in her eyes, a sadness that spoke of hardship and loss. She thought about how this woman had nothing, and yet she'd given Emily her time, her knowledge, her kindness, without expecting anything in return. She thought about how the woman had refused the money, how she'd said Emily might need it more. And she realized something that would haunt her for months to come. That woman had been dealt an impossible hand by life, and yet she'd chosen to help a stranger. She'd chosen compassion. She'd chosen humanity. Emily lay awake that night, unable to sleep. She kept seeing Maya's face. She kept hearing her voice. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never forget this moment. Meanwhile, Maya returned to her bench. She had no idea that she'd just helped a tourist find her way. She had no idea that this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would eventually circle back to her in the most unexpected way imaginable. She had no idea that Emily would spend the next several months thinking about her, researching homelessness, becoming obsessed with finding ways to help. For now, she simply settled back onto the cold bench, pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, and waited for the night to come. She watched the city lights flicker on, one by one, as darkness fell. She listened to the sounds of the city: traffic, distant sirens, the murmur of people heading home from work. And she thought about the young woman she'd helped. She hoped she'd made it back safely. She hoped she'd be okay. But Maya had no idea that this single act of kindness would come back to haunt her in the most unexpected way imaginable. The weeks that followed their encounter were transformative for Emily in ways she couldn't have anticipated. She returned to her normal life, her job, her apartment, her routine. But something fundamental had shifted inside her. She couldn't shake the memory of Maya. She couldn't stop thinking about the woman on the bench, about her kindness, about the sadness in her eyes that spoke of a lifetime of struggle and pain. Emily tried to move on. She really did. She threw herself back into work with renewed vigor, attending meetings, managing campaigns, hitting deadlines, staying late at the office. She told herself that what happened on that Tuesday afternoon was just a moment, just a fleeting intersection of two lives that would never intersect again. She told herself to forget about it, to move forward, to focus on her own life. But she couldn't, no matter how hard she tried. During her lunch breaks, instead of gossiping with coworkers or scrolling through social media, she found herself researching homelessness statistics. She read articles about affordable housing crises, about the shortage of available housing units, about landlords who refuse to rent to people with criminal records or eviction histories. She watched documentaries about people living on the streets, their stories, their struggles, their humanity. She learned about the systemic failures that pushed people into poverty, about the lack of mental health resources, about the stigma that made it nearly impossible for homeless individuals to reintegrate into society. The more she learned, the more she felt compelled to do something. She couldn't just go back to her comfortable life and pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen. She couldn't unknow what she now knew. It would be a betrayal of that moment, a betrayal of Maya's kindness. One evening, sitting in her apartment with the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face, Emily made a decision that would change the trajectory of her entire life. She started volunteering at a local homeless shelter on weekends. She served meals. She helped distribute blankets and hygiene kits. She listened to people's stories, and with each person she met, she thought of Maya. She wondered where Maya was. Was she warm enough? Was she eating? Was she safe? Had she survived another night on the streets? The shelter was a sprawling facility in an old warehouse that had been converted to provide beds, meals, and basic services to the city's homeless population. It was located in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Boarded-up storefronts, abandoned buildings, the kind of place where most people wouldn't venture after dark. The shelter was run by a dedicated team of social workers, volunteers, and healthcare professionals who worked tirelessly to help people get back on their feet, often with minimal resources and maximum compassion. The conditions were basic but clean. There were rows of cots arranged in dormitory-style sleeping quarters, separated by gender. There was a large industrial kitchen where meals were prepared daily. There was a shower facility with multiple stalls and hot water, a luxury that many of the residents hadn't experienced in months or even years. There was a small office where caseworkers helped people navigate the labyrinth of social services, benefits applications, and housing programs. There was a medical clinic staffed by volunteer nurses and doctors who provided basic health care. There was a library with computers where residents could apply for jobs, check email, or simply escape the chaos of the main facility. Emily threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even her. She volunteered every Saturday and Sunday, often staying longer than scheduled because there was always more to do. She learned the names of the regulars, the people who came back week after week, month after month. She remembered their stories. She remembered that Marcus had been a construction worker before an accident left him unable to work. She remembered that Susan had lost custody of her children and couldn't afford the housing that would allow her to regain custody. She remembered that David had struggled with addiction for years and was now 3 months sober, but still fighting the demons that had nearly destroyed him. She helped fill out applications for housing assistance programs, sitting beside residents as they explained their situations to bureaucrats on the phone or in person. She drove people to job interviews in her own car, helping them practice their answers to common interview questions. She became a mentor, a friend, an advocate. She became obsessed with making a difference, with helping people like Maya, with proving that one person could actually change things. Her friends thought she was crazy. They didn't understand why she was spending her weekends in what they perceived as a dangerous neighborhood, why she was giving up her free time, why she was putting herself at risk. Her best friend Sarah actually confronted her about it one evening over drinks. "Emily, I'm worried about you," Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine concern. "You're changing. You're obsessed with this shelter thing. You're talking about quitting your job. This isn't like you." "Maybe the old me was wrong," Emily replied quietly. "Maybe the old me was selfish. I have so much, Sarah. I have a good job, a nice apartment, financial security. And there are people out there sleeping on the streets. How can I just ignore that?" Her mother called her repeatedly, concerned about her safety and her mental state. "Why are you spending your weekends in that neighborhood?" her mother asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Why are you putting yourself at risk? You have a good life, Emily. Why do you want to throw it away helping people who don't want to be helped?" "They do want to be helped, Mom," Emily said firmly. "They just need someone to believe in them. They need someone to see them as human beings instead of problems to be ignored." But her mother couldn't understand. Her mother had grown up in a different era, with different values, different fears. She saw homelessness as a personal failure rather than a systemic problem. She was afraid that Emily would be hurt, that she would be taken advantage of, that she would lose herself in the process of trying to save others. Emily knew better, though. She'd seen it firsthand. These people didn't want to be on the streets. They were victims of circumstance, of bad luck, of a system that didn't have a safety net strong enough to catch them when they fell. They were people who had experienced trauma, who had faced obstacles that most people would never encounter, who had survived things that would break most people. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Maya's situation was deteriorating rapidly, moving from precarious to genuinely dangerous. Winter was coming. She could feel it in the air, in the way the nights were getting colder, in the way the city was transforming from autumn into something harsher and more unforgiving. The leaves were turning brown and falling from the trees. The days were getting shorter. The sun was setting earlier each evening. And with each passing day, Maya felt the weight of dread settling deeper into her chest. Winter on the streets was a death sentence for people like Maya. She'd heard the stories from other homeless individuals, tales of people who didn't survive the cold, who succumbed to hypothermia in the darkest hours of the night. She'd seen people disappear, their bodies found in the spring when the snow melted, when the city finally took notice of the lives that had been lost. She'd watched friends succumb to hypothermia, to illness, to the sheer brutality of exposure. She'd attended memorials for people she'd known, people she'd shared meals with, people who'd been alive one day and gone the next. She needed to find shelter, real shelter. Not just a bench or a doorway, not just a recessed entryway where she could huddle out of the wind, but an actual bed, an actual roof over her head, actual walls that could protect her from the elements. But the shelters were overcrowded. Beds were limited. The city had a homeless population that far exceeded the available shelter capacity. And Maya had learned that getting into a shelter required navigating a bureaucratic maze that seemed designed to keep people out rather than let them in. You had to know where to go. You had to know what time to arrive. You had to have the right documents, or at least know how to explain why you didn't have them. You had to be able to navigate a system that was confusing and often contradictory. You had to prove that you deserved help. She'd tried. She'd gone to the municipal shelter on several occasions, only to find that beds were full. There was a waiting list. She could put her name on it. Maybe in a few weeks there would be space. Maybe. She'd been turned away. She'd spent nights in the cold, huddled under her thin blanket, wondering if this was the night she wouldn't wake up. She'd lain awake listening to the sounds of the city at night, distant sirens, the occasional car passing by, the wind howling through the urban canyons. She'd thought about her life before homelessness, about the choices that had led her here, about whether she deserved to be here or if this was just bad luck. By late October, as the temperatures began to drop more seriously, as the first frost began to appear in the mornings, Maya was running out of options. She was also getting sick. She had a persistent cough that wouldn't go away, a deep, rattling cough that came from deep in her chest. Her chest hurt when she breathed deeply. She was weak and tired all the time. She had no appetite. She was losing weight. She knew what it meant. Pneumonia, or something close to it. On the streets, illness was a luxury you couldn't afford. It was a death sentence. Your body was your most valuable asset. And when it failed you, there was nowhere to turn. No one to care for you. No medical system that would help you without money. One night, in early November, as the first real freeze of the season settled over the city, the temperature dropped to freezing. It was the kind of cold that made your breath visible, that made your skin sting, that seemed to penetrate every layer of clothing and find the warmth beneath. Maya had found a relatively sheltered spot behind a building, a recessed doorway that blocked some of the wind, that provided a little protection from the elements. She'd layered all her clothing, everything she owned, worn in multiple layers to trap body heat. She'd wrapped herself in her blanket, a thin, worn thing that had once been someone's bedspread. But it wasn't enough. The cold was relentless. It was alive. It was a presence, a force, something that seemed to have intention and malice. It seeped through every layer, through her skin, into her bones, into the very core of her being. She couldn't stop shaking. Her teeth chattered so violently she thought they might crack. Her fingers were numb. Her toes had lost all sensation hours ago. Her breath came in shallow gasps because breathing deeply caused sharp pain in her chest. She was coughing so hard that she was bringing up blood-tinged phlegm. She was terrified. She lay on the cold concrete, shivering uncontrollably, her body racked with violent tremors, and she thought about giving up. She thought about how easy it would be to just close her eyes and let the cold take her. How much easier that would be than continuing to fight, continuing to struggle, continuing to survive in a world that had made it clear it didn't want her. She thought about her family, about the people she'd lost contact with, about whether anyone would even care if she died. She thought about the woman she'd helped on the street corner, Emily. She wondered if Emily had made it back safely, if she'd thought about Maya again, if she'd remembered the kindness of a stranger. That's when she heard the voice. It came through the fog of pain and cold and despair like a lifeline. Hey, are you okay? It was a young man, maybe in his 20s, wearing a hoodie and carrying a backpack. His name was Marcus. Not the same Marcus who worked construction, but a different Marcus, a young man who'd grown up in poverty himself and had dedicated his life to helping others escape it. He worked for a mobile outreach program, a team that went out into the streets at night to check on homeless individuals, to make sure they were alive, to provide basic services, to connect them with shelters and social services. The program had been expanded recently, thanks to a grant that had been written by a woman named Emily. I'm fine, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper through her chattering teeth. I'm okay, just resting. You're not fine, Marcus said. He knelt down beside her, checking her vital signs with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this many times before. Her pulse was weak. Her body temperature was dangerously low. She was in the early stages of hypothermia. You're hypothermic. We need to get you to a shelter. Now. You could die out here tonight. Maya wanted to protest. She wanted to say she was okay, that she didn't need help, that she'd survived this long and she could survive longer. But her body had other ideas. She was too weak to resist. She was too sick to fight. The young man helped her up, supported her weight as her legs nearly buckled beneath her, and guided her to a van waiting nearby. The van was warm, heated with blankets inside. It felt like paradise. The van took her to an emergency shelter, a temporary facility set up specifically for extreme weather events. It was crowded but warm. There were cots, blankets, hot food. Maya was given a bed in the corner, away from the main activity, and a volunteer brought her hot soup and bread. A nurse checked her over and confirmed what Maya already knew. She had a serious respiratory infection, possibly pneumonia. She was given antibiotics and told to rest, to drink fluids, to let her body recover. For the first time in months, Maya slept in a real bed. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She slept for 14 hours straight, her body finally allowing itself to rest, to heal, to recover from the trauma of survival. But even as she recovered physically over the following days, something inside her remained broken. She'd come so close to giving up. She'd been ready to let go. She'd been prepared to die. And while she was grateful for the intervention, grateful to be alive, grateful to this young man who'd found her and saved her life, she also felt the weight of despair pressing down on her. How long could she keep doing this? How long before her luck ran out? How long before the next winter, the next illness, the next crisis pushed her over the edge? Back at the shelter where Emily volunteered, things were changing too, evolving in ways that would eventually intersect with Maya's own journey. Emily had become increasingly involved in the shelter's operations. She'd started attending staff meetings, listening to discussions about funding, about capacity, about the growing homelessness crisis in the city. She'd begun helping with grant writing to secure funding for expanded services, applications to foundations, to government agencies, to corporate sponsors. She'd even convinced her company to donate supplies and organize volunteer days, mobilizing her corporate network to support the shelter's mission. One of the initiatives she'd pushed for most strongly was an expanded outreach program. The kind of program that had saved Maya's life that cold November night. Emily had researched mobile outreach teams and discovered that they were one of the most effective ways to connect homeless individuals with services. Studies showed that outreach teams could identify people in crisis, provide immediate assistance, and connect them with longer-term services. Emily had written a comprehensive proposal, complete with research, budget projections, and outcome metrics. She'd secured funding from a private foundation that was interested in innovative approaches to homelessness. And by mid-November, the shelter had expanded its outreach team from 2 people to 5. Emily didn't know it yet, but the young man who had found Maya on that freezing night, Marcus, was part of the team that Emily had helped fund. The antibiotics that saved Maya's life had been purchased with supplies that Emily's company had donated. The warm bed where Maya recovered had been made possible by the grant that Emily had helped write. The van that Marcus drove had been purchased with funds from the same foundation. The hot soup that had warmed Maya's body had been prepared in a kitchen that had been supplied by Emily's company. Fate was weaving its threads together, preparing for a collision that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. As November progressed into December, Maya recovered physically, but remained emotionally fragile, struggling with the psychological weight of her experience. She'd been moved from the emergency shelter to a longer-term facility, a transitional housing program that provided beds for up to 6 months while residents worked on getting back on their feet. It wasn't perfect. The facility was crowded, the bathrooms were shared, the walls were thin, and you could hear your neighbors through them. But it was stable. It was safe. It had heat and running water and regular meals. The social worker assigned to her case was a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been working with homeless populations for over 15 years. Patricia had seen it all: the addictions, the mental health crises, the domestic violence, the job loss, the medical emergencies that had destroyed people's lives. She'd seen people recover and rebuild their lives. She'd also seen people give up. People who couldn't overcome the obstacles in their path, people who returned to the streets or worse. Patricia was tough, but compassionate. She didn't take excuses, but she also understood the systemic barriers that kept people trapped in poverty. She understood that homelessness wasn't a character flaw, that it was a complex problem with complex causes, and that recovery required both individual effort and systemic support. "You need a job," Patricia told Maya during one of their weekly meetings in her small office. Patricia's office was decorated with plants and photos of residents who'd successfully transitioned out of homelessness. Not because I'm being harsh, but because you need structure. You need purpose. You need to start rebuilding your life. You need to prove to yourself that you can do this. Maya knew Patricia was right. But the thought of going back into the world, of facing employers who would see her as damaged, as unreliable, as someone who'd failed, it terrified her. She'd been out of the workforce for 2 years. She had a gap in her employment history. She didn't have recent references. She didn't have professional clothing. She didn't have the confidence that she'd once possessed. "I don't know if I can do this," Maya said quietly, her voice small and uncertain. "I don't know if anyone will hire me. I don't know if I can handle working again. What if I fail?" "You survived 2 years on the streets," Patricia said firmly. "You helped a stranger when you had nothing. You have more strength than you think. I've seen it in you. We're going to find you a job. We're going to get you stable housing. We're going to get you back on your feet. But you have to be willing to try. You have to believe that you deserve a better life." So Maya tried. She attended job training sessions held in the shelter's conference room. She worked with Patricia to update her resume, creating a document that emphasized her skills and downplayed the gap in her employment history. She practiced interview skills with a volunteer from a local business school. She went on interviews, her heart pounding each time, terrified of rejection, but also desperate for hope. Most of them didn't go anywhere. She'd interview well, or so she thought, and then never hear back. She'd be told that they decided to go in another direction. She'd be told that she was overqualified or underqualified or just not quite what they were looking for. Each rejection stung, each one reinforcing her fears that she was damaged goods, that no one would ever trust her again. But then, in early December, as the holiday season was beginning and the city was decorated with lights and garland, she got a job at a local coffee shop called The Daily Grind. It was minimum wage, part-time, nothing glamorous. She'd be working the morning shift, 5 to 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. She'd be making coffee, taking orders, cleaning the shop. It was entry-level work, the kind of job that most people would consider beneath them. But for Maya, it was everything. It was a start. It was hope. It was proof that she could do this, that she could rebuild her life, that the future didn't have to be as bleak as the past 2 years had been. She celebrated with Patricia, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that extended beyond the next day, the next week, the next survival. Emily, meanwhile, had become increasingly invested in the shelter's work. She'd started spending more time there, not just volunteering on weekends, but actually working with the organization to develop new programs and initiatives. She'd taken a leave of absence from her marketing job, a leave that was looking increasingly permanent, to work full-time at the shelter as a volunteer coordinator. The shelter's director, a woman named Dr. Helen Martinez, had recognized Emily's potential early on. Helen had been running the shelter for 12 years and had seen many volunteers come and go. Most lasted a few months before the emotional weight became too much. But Emily was different. Emily had a vision. Emily had energy. Emily had connections and resources. Helen had encouraged her to take on more responsibility to help shape the shelter's future. Emily's friends thought she was insane. They didn't understand the transformation that had taken place in her. The woman who'd once spent her weekends shopping and going to brunch was now spending her time writing grant proposals and training volunteers. The woman who'd once been obsessed with her career advancement was now obsessed with helping people rebuild their lives. Her best friend Sarah actually confronted her about it one evening over drinks at a wine bar downtown. Sarah worked in finance and couldn't understand Emily's choices. "Emily, I'm worried about you," Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine concern. "You're changing. You're obsessed with this shelter thing. You're talking about quitting your job permanently. This isn't like you. The Emily I know cares about her career, about making money, about having nice things." "Maybe the old me was wrong," Emily replied quietly, swirling her wine glass but not drinking. "Maybe the old me was selfish. I have so much, Sarah. I have a good job, a nice apartment, financial security. And there are people out there sleeping on the streets, dying in the cold, struggling just to survive. How can I just ignore that? How can I go back to my comfortable life and pretend that I didn't see what I saw?" Her mother called her repeatedly, concerned about her safety and her mental state. She was afraid that Emily was throwing her life away, that she was making a mistake, that she would regret this decision later. "Why are you spending all your time in that neighborhood?" her mother asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Why are you putting yourself at risk? You have a good life, Emily. You have security. Why do you want to throw it away helping people who don't want to be helped?" "They do want to be helped, Mom," Emily said firmly. "They just need someone to believe in them. They need someone to see them as human beings instead of problems to be ignored. They need someone to care." But her mother couldn't understand. Her mother had grown up in a different era, with different values, different fears. She saw homelessness as a personal failure rather than a systemic problem. She was afraid that Emily would be hurt, that she would be taken advantage of, that she would lose herself in the process of trying to save others. She couldn't see what Emily had discovered, that helping others was actually helping herself, that finding purpose in service was more fulfilling than any career advancement could ever be. By early December, Emily had made the decision official. She was leaving her marketing job. She was going to work full-time at the shelter starting in January. The salary would be a fraction of what she'd been making, but she didn't care. She'd saved money over the years. She could live simply. She could make it work. Dr. Martinez had offered her a position as the shelter's Director of Community Partnerships and Grant Development. It was a new position, created specifically for Emily's skill set. Emily would be responsible for building relationships with businesses, foundations, and government agencies. She would be responsible for securing funding for the shelter's programs. She would help shape the shelter's future. It was the perfect role for her. And it meant that she would be at the shelter almost every day, working closely with the residents, learning their stories, helping them rebuild their lives. One day in early December, as the holiday decorations were going up around the shelter and the staff was planning a Christmas party for the residents, Emily was at the shelter going through intake forms, the paperwork that new residents filled out when they arrived. She was trying to get a sense of who was currently staying at the facility, what their needs were, what services they required. She was also looking for potential success stories. People who'd made progress, people whose stories could be used in grant applications and fundraising materials. As she flipped through the forms, one name caught her eye: Maya Richardson. Emily's heart stopped. She read the form again, making sure she wasn't imagining things, that her mind wasn't playing tricks on her. Name: Maya Richardson. Age: 34. Reason for homelessness: medical emergency, job loss, housing instability. Length of homelessness: 2 years. Current status: admitted to emergency shelter November 8th due to hypothermia and respiratory infection. Now in transitional housing program. It was her. It had to be her. The woman from the street corner. The woman who'd helped her when she was lost. The woman who'd haunted her thoughts for the past 4 months. The woman who'd inspired her to change her entire life. Emily's hands were shaking as she looked up the address where Maya was currently staying. It was the transitional housing facility across town on Riverside Avenue. Emily made a decision right then and there. She was going to find her. She was going to thank her properly. She was going to help her. She was going to return the favor that Maya had given her on that Tuesday afternoon 4 months ago. But what Emily didn't know was that this reunion would be just the beginning of something far more shocking than either of them could have imagined. She didn't know that the universe had woven their stories together in ways that would challenge everything they believed about fate, about kindness, about the interconnectedness of human lives. She didn't know that this encounter would change not just her life and Maya's life, but the lives of everyone around them. Emily stood outside the transitional housing facility on Riverside Avenue, her heart pounding. She'd found Maya's name in the intake forms at the shelter. After 4 months of wondering, she finally knew where the woman who'd helped her was staying. She walked through the doors and asked to see Maya Richardson. When Maya appeared in the visiting area, shock registered on her face. "You. It's you. From that day." "Yes," Emily said. "I've been looking for you. I needed to thank you properly." They talked for hours. Emily told Maya about how that one moment had changed her entire life. How she'd left her marketing job, how she'd started volunteering at the shelter, how she'd eventually become the volunteer coordinator. Maya told her about the 2 years on the streets, about the night she almost died from hypothermia, about the young man who'd found her, about the job she'd just started at a local coffee shop. Over the next few weeks, Emily visited regularly. They became close friends. But something deeper was developing between them. Feelings that went beyond gratitude or friendship. In late December, Emily's mother called her. "Your friend Sarah told me you've been visiting a resident at the transitional facility. She said it's a woman. Emily, is there something you need to tell me?" Emily hesitated. "I care about her, a lot." "Emily, I need you to be careful," her mother said. "This woman is vulnerable. You need to make sure you're not taking advantage of that." After the call, Emily realized she needed to be honest with Maya about her feelings. A few days before Christmas, they met at a coffee shop. Emily took a deep breath. "I care about you," Emily said. in a way that goes beyond friendship. I know this might be complicated, but I can't pretend anymore. I feel the same way, Maya said, tears in her eyes. I've been terrified to tell you. They held hands across the table, both crying, both scared, but also hopeful. But their happiness was short-lived. A few days later, Dr. Martinez called Emily into her office. There's been a complaint, Martinez said. A board member is concerned about the ethics of your relationship with Maya. He's threatening to push for your removal. Emily felt her world tilt. What are my options? You can resign, end the relationship, or fight it at the board meeting, Martinez said. I'm not ending the relationship, Emily said firmly. And I'm not resigning. I'm going to fight this. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Maya had to keep their relationship secret. It was torture. They could only communicate through texts and phone calls. Maya's anxiety spiked as she worried about Emily losing her job because of her. Patricia, Maya's social worker, noticed the change. When Maya told her everything, Patricia said, "If this relationship is real, it will survive the scrutiny. Be honest. Don't hide." The board meeting was held on January 15th. A board member named Daniels presented his concerns. The relationship created a conflict of interest, and there was an inherent power imbalance that made the relationship exploitative. Emily stood up to respond. First, I don't make decisions about Maya's case. Patricia does. Second, yes, there's a power imbalance in the shelter context, but that doesn't mean I'm exploiting it. Maya and I are equals in our relationship. Then Maya stood up. I'm an adult. I have agency. I have the right to choose who I love. And I choose Emily, not because she's helping me, but because I love her. Dr. Martinez spoke in support of Emily, praising her work and her integrity. The board voted, 7 in favor of allowing Emily to continue, 1 opposed. Emily and Maya walked out of the shelter together, finally able to hold hands openly. For the first time, they didn't have to hide. The first few months after the board meeting were a whirlwind of change for Emily and Maya. They moved in together in a small apartment in a neighborhood that was affordable but safe. It was a modest place. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, hardwood floors that creaked when you walked on them. But to Maya, it felt like a palace. Emily continued her work at the shelter, now with full support from the board. She threw herself into developing new programs, securing grants, expanding the outreach team. Maya continued working at the coffee shop, slowly building confidence and relationships with her co-workers. She'd been promoted to shift supervisor after just 3 months, a recognition of her hard work and reliability. They were building a life together, a real life, a future. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It started with a phone call in late March. Emily was at work when her phone rang. It was the hospital. Her father had suffered a massive heart attack. He was in intensive care. They didn't know if he would make it. Emily's world collapsed. She'd always had a complicated relationship with her father. He'd been distant, critical, more focused on his career than on his family. But he was still her father, and the thought of losing him was devastating. She rushed to the hospital, her mind spinning. Maya had wanted to come with her, but Emily had insisted on going alone. She needed time to process, time to think, time to figure out what she was feeling. At the hospital, she found her mother in the waiting room, her face pale and drawn. They embraced, and for the first time in years, Emily felt like a child again, vulnerable, scared, needing her mother's comfort. "The doctors say he's stable for now," her mother said. but they don't know if there's permanent damage. They don't know if he'll ever be the same. Emily sat beside her mother through the night, holding her hand, both of them waiting for news that might never come. By morning, her father had regained consciousness. He was weak and confused, but he was alive. The doctors said that with rehabilitation and lifestyle changes, he had a good chance of making a full recovery. Emily felt relief wash over her, followed immediately by guilt. Guilt that she'd been so focused on her own life that she hadn't been paying attention to her father's health. Guilt that she'd let their relationship deteriorate. Guilt that she'd been so caught up in her own transformation that she'd forgotten about the people who'd raised her. Over the next few weeks, Emily spent a lot of time at the hospital and then at her parents' house, helping her mother care for her father during his recovery. She reduced her hours at the shelter. She spent less time with Maya. Maya tried to be understanding. She knew Emily needed to be with her family, but she also felt the distance growing between them. Emily was stressed, exhausted, emotionally unavailable. They barely talked. When they did, Emily seemed distracted, worried about her father, worried about her mother, worried about everything except their relationship. One evening, when Emily came home late from her parents' house, Maya tried to talk to her about it. "I feel like I'm losing you," Maya said quietly. "I feel like you're pulling away." "I'm not pulling away," Emily said defensively. "My father almost died. I need to be there for my family." "I know," Maya said, "and I support that. But I also feel like you're using it as an excuse to avoid dealing with us, with our relationship." "That's not fair," Emily said. "I'm doing the best I can." "I know you are," Maya said. "But so am I, and I feel like I'm not enough. I feel like you're regretting being with me." The words hung in the air between them. Emily wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Because the truth was, she was struggling. She was struggling with the reality of their relationship. With the fact that it was harder than she'd expected, with the fact that love wasn't always enough to overcome all obstacles. "I'm not regretting being with you," Emily said finally. "But I'm also not sure I know how to do this. I'm not sure I know how to be in a relationship with a woman. I'm not sure I know how to balance everything." "So what are you saying?" Maya asked, her voice small and frightened. "I'm saying I need time," Emily said. "I'm saying I need to figure things out. I'm saying I need space." The words devastated Maya. She'd been so afraid of this, so afraid that Emily would eventually realize that being with her was too complicated, too messy, too much work. Emily moved back to her parents' house to help with her father's recovery. She told herself it was temporary, just until her father was back on his feet. But as the weeks turned into months, she realized that she was using her father's recovery as an excuse to avoid dealing with her relationship with Maya. They talked on the phone, but the conversations were strained. They texted, but the messages felt distant. They were drifting apart, and neither of them knew how to stop it. Maya threw herself into her work at the coffee shop. She was promoted again, this time to assistant manager. She was doing well professionally, but emotionally, she was falling apart. She'd started having panic attacks again. She'd started withdrawing from the world. She'd started to wonder if she'd made a mistake in letting herself fall in love with Emily. Patricia noticed the change immediately. During one of their meetings, she asked Maya directly, "What's going on? You seem depressed." Maya told her everything. She told Patricia about Emily's father, about the distance that had grown between them, about Emily asking for space, about the fear that Emily was going to leave her. "Have you talked to Emily about this?" Patricia asked. "I've tried," Maya said, "but she's not really listening. She's too focused on her father, on her family. I feel like I'm not a priority anymore. Then you need to make yourself a priority, Patricia said. You need to be honest with Emily about how you're feeling. You need to tell her that you can't keep living like this. You need to tell her that you need her to choose. Either she's committed to this relationship or she's not. In May, Emily finally came home. Her father was doing well, his recovery was progressing, and her mother had things under control. Emily knew she couldn't hide at her parents' house forever. When she walked into the apartment, Maya was there waiting. She looked different. Thinner, more fragile, like she'd been carrying a heavy weight and it had worn her down. "We need to talk," Maya said. They sat down on the couch, the same couch where they'd first held each other after the board meeting. It felt like a lifetime ago. "I can't keep doing this," Maya said. "I can't keep waiting for you to figure out if you want to be with me or not. I can't keep being second priority. I need to know where I stand. I need to know if you're committed to this relationship or if you want to end it." Emily felt tears spring to her eyes. "I don't want to end it." "Then what do you want?" Maya asked. "Because right now, it feels like you're just going through the motions. It feels like you're regretting being with me." Emily was quiet for a long moment. She thought about everything that had happened. The moment on the street corner, the months of transformation, the board meeting, the early days of their relationship when everything felt magical and possible. "I'm scared," Emily said finally. "I'm scared that I'm not good enough for you. I'm scared that I'm going to mess this up. I'm scared that I don't know how to be in a relationship with a woman. I'm scared that my family is never going to accept us. I'm scared of so many things." "I'm scared too," Maya said. "But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of anything else. And I need to know that you feel the same way. I need to know that I'm worth fighting for." Emily reached over and took Maya's hand. "You are worth fighting for. You're the most important thing in my life. And I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't. I'm sorry for pulling away. I'm sorry for not being honest about my fears." They held each other, both crying, both relieved that they were finally having the conversation they'd been avoiding for months. "I want to do this right," Emily said. "I want to build a real life with you. I want to figure out how to balance my family and my work and my relationship with you. I want to make this work." "Then let's do it," Maya said. "Let's really do it. No more hiding, no more running away. Let's just be honest with each other and figure it out as we go." Over the next few months, Emily and Maya worked on rebuilding their relationship. They went to couples therapy, something Emily had been resistant to, but which turned out to be incredibly helpful. They talked about their fears, their expectations, their dreams for the future. Emily came out to her mother, who was more accepting than Emily had expected. Her mother told her that she just wanted Emily to be happy, that she supported her no matter what. She also told Emily that she wanted to meet Maya, to get to know her properly, to understand why her daughter loved her so much. Emily's father was more resistant. He struggled with the idea of Emily being in a relationship with a woman. But over time, as he got to know Maya, as he saw how happy she made Emily, he began to accept it. It wasn't easy for him, but he tried. Maya, meanwhile, continued to build her career. She decided to go back to school, taking evening classes to get her GED. She had dreams of becoming a social worker herself, of helping other people who'd experienced homelessness. Emily supported her fully, helping her study, celebrating her successes. By the end of the year, Emily and Maya had built something real, something solid, something that could withstand the challenges that life threw at them. They'd learned that love wasn't just about the magical moments. Love was about showing up, day after day, even when things were hard. Love was about being honest, about communicating, about fighting for each other. Love was about growth and change and commitment. On New Year's Eve, Emily took Maya to the same street corner where they'd first met. It was a cold night, the city decorated with holiday lights. They stood there, holding each other, remembering that moment that had changed everything. "I love you," Emily said. "I love you too," Maya replied. And as the clock struck midnight and the new year began, they kissed, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. 2 years had passed since Emily and Maya first met on that street corner. 2 years of transformation, struggle, growth, and love. 2 years of building a life together. Emily stood in the shelter's conference room, looking at the wall covered with photos and success stories. There was Marcus, the young man from the mobile outreach team, smiling in front of his new apartment. There was David, 3 years sober now, working as a peer counselor. There was Susan, reunited with her children, starting a new job as the administrative assistant. And there, in the center of the wall, was a photo of Maya. But this wasn't a photo of Maya as a resident. This was a photo of Maya in her new role, community outreach coordinator at the shelter. Maya had completed her GED 6 months ago. She'd then enrolled in a social work program at the local community college. While she was studying, she'd started working at the shelter part-time, using her own experience to help other residents navigate their recovery. Her work had been so exceptional that when a full-time position opened up, Dr. Martinez had offered it to her immediately. Emily had recused herself from the hiring decision, wanting to make sure that Maya's position was based purely on merit, not on their relationship. But everyone at the shelter knew that Maya was perfect for the job. She understood what residents were going through because she'd been through it herself. She had credibility. She had compassion. She had the ability to see people not as problems, but as human beings with potential. "You ready for this?" Dr. Martinez asked, appearing beside Emily. "I think so," Emily said. "Are you?" "Absolutely," Martinez said. "This is going to be a good day." Today was the shelter's 5th annual gala, a fundraising event that Emily had created 2 years ago to raise money for the shelter's programs. It had grown from a small gathering of donors to a major event that attracted hundreds of people from the community, from local businesses, from foundations. This year's gala was special for another reason. It was being held to celebrate the shelter's expansion. Thanks to Emily's grant writing and fundraising efforts, the shelter had been able to purchase the building next door and expand its capacity by 50%. They'd also opened a new vocational training program, a mental health clinic, and an expanded outreach team. The shelter had transformed from a basic emergency facility to a comprehensive resource center for homeless individuals. And it had all started with Emily's decision to leave her corporate job and dedicate herself to this work. That evening, the gala was in full swing. The ballroom of the downtown hotel was decorated elegantly, with tables of donors and supporters mingling with residents and staff. There was a silent auction with items donated by local businesses. There was a live band. There was food and drinks and conversation. Emily wore a simple black dress. Maya wore a deep blue dress that brought out her eyes. They couldn't keep their hands off each other, and they didn't try to hide it. 2 years ago, they would have been worried about what people thought. Now, they were just happy to be together, to celebrate their accomplishments, to share this moment with the community that had supported them. During the program, Dr. Martinez took the stage to talk about the shelter's work over the past year. She talked about the number of people served, the number of people who transitioned into housing, the number of people who'd found employment. She talked about the partnerships they'd built, the programs they'd developed, the impact they'd had. Then she introduced Emily. Emily Patterson came to us 2 years ago as a volunteer. Martinez said. She was searching for meaning in her life. She found it here, in this work, in this community. Emily has transformed this shelter. She's brought in over $2 million in funding. She's developed innovative programs. She's changed the lives of hundreds of people. But more importantly, she's changed the culture of this shelter. She's shown us what it means to truly care, to truly see people, to truly believe in their potential. The audience applauded as Emily took the stage. She felt nervous, but also proud. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, the woman in the corporate job, the woman who'd been lost and searching for meaning. That woman felt like a stranger now. When I first came to this shelter, Emily said, I was looking for a way to help. I was looking for a way to make a difference. But what I found was so much more than that. I found purpose. I found community. I found love. She looked out at the audience and found Maya's face. I found someone who showed me what it means to be human. Someone who, despite having nothing, showed me kindness. Someone who changed my life. Emily paused, gathering her courage. 2 years ago, I met someone on the street. I was lost, and she helped me find my way. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. That moment would lead me here, to this work, to this community, to this person I love. Emily took a deep breath. Tonight, I want to announce something. I want to announce that the shelter is launching a new initiative called the Second Chances Program. This program is designed to help homeless individuals not just find housing and employment, but to rebuild their lives holistically. We'll provide mental health services, vocational training, life coaching, and peer support. And the program will be led by Maya Richardson, one of our most dedicated staff members and one of the most inspiring people I know. The audience applauded. Maya stood up, tears streaming down her face as everyone turned to look at her. She walked to the stage and embraced Emily. I also want to announce something personal, Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. The audience gasped. Maya's hand went to her mouth. Maya Richardson, Emily said, getting down on one knee. 2 years ago, you saved my life. You showed me kindness when I needed it most. You've shown me what it means to love, to fight, to persevere. You've made me a better person. Will you marry me? Maya was crying too hard to speak at first. She nodded, unable to find words. Emily slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple diamond on a white gold band, and stood up to kiss her. The audience erupted in applause and cheers. Emily and Maya held each other on the stage, both crying, both laughing, both overwhelmed by the moment. In the months that followed, Emily and Maya planned their wedding. They decided to have it at the shelter, in the courtyard that they'd renovated. They wanted their community to be part of their celebration. They wanted the residents, the staff, the donors, the volunteers, everyone who'd been part of their journey, to witness their commitment to each other. The wedding was simple but beautiful. Maya wore a white dress. Emily wore a tailored suit. They exchanged vows that they'd written themselves, talking about their journey, about their love, about their commitment to each other and to the work they were doing together. Patricia Chen, Maya's social worker, was one of the witnesses. Marcus, the young man from the outreach team who'd found Maya on that freezing night, was one of Emily's groomsmen, Dr. Martinez gave a reading about love and commitment. Emily's parents attended, both of them finally fully accepting their daughter's relationship. Her mother cried throughout the ceremony. Her father smiled, genuinely happy for his daughter. Maya's family was there too. She'd reconnected with them during her recovery, and while the relationship was still healing, they were making progress. Her mother hugged Emily and told her how grateful she was that someone loved her daughter so much. As Emily and Maya exchanged rings, as they kissed to seal their commitment, the residents and staff of the shelter cheered. These were people who'd seen Emily and Maya's journey from the beginning. These were people who understood what this moment meant. Not just a wedding, but a celebration of love, of transformation, of second chances. A year later, Emily was sitting in her office at the shelter when she received an unexpected visitor. It was a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, thin and worn-looking, with the unmistakable appearance of someone who'd been living on the streets. "Hi," the woman said nervously. "I'm looking for help. I don't know where to start." Emily smiled, remembering her own moment of being lost, of not knowing where to start. She stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome," Emily said. "You've come to the right place. My name is Emily. Let me help you find your way." As Emily walked the young woman through the shelter's intake process, explaining the services available, introducing her to staff members, she thought about how far they'd all come. She thought about the moment on the street corner that had started everything. She thought about how one act of kindness had rippled outward, changing lives, transforming a community. That evening, Emily told Maya about the new resident. "Another lost soul," Maya said, smiling. "Another person looking for a second chance," Emily replied. They were sitting on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sunset over the city. Their apartment was filled with photos of their wedding, of their time at the shelter, of the residents they'd helped. It was a home filled with love and purpose. "Do you ever think about that day?" Maya asked. "The day we met?" "Every day," Emily said. "I think about how lost I was. I think about how you helped me. I think about how that one moment changed everything." "I wasn't trying to change your life," Maya said. "I was just trying to help someone who looked lost." "I know," Emily said. "That's what made it so powerful. You didn't do it for recognition. You didn't do it expecting anything in return. You just did it because it was the right thing to do." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the city lights come on as darkness fell. "I'm happy," Maya said finally. "I'm genuinely happy. I never thought I'd be able to say that again." Emily took her hand. "Me too. I'm happy too." 5 years after that first meeting on the street corner, the shelter had grown into one of the most respected homeless services organizations in the city. Emily had been named executive director after Dr. Martinez retired. Maya was now the director of community programs, overseeing all of the shelter's direct services. Together, they'd transformed not just the shelter, but the entire approach to homelessness in the city. They'd advocated for policy changes. They'd built partnerships with businesses and government agencies. They'd created a model that other cities were now trying to replicate. But more importantly, they'd changed individual lives. Hundreds of people had passed through the shelter's doors. Hundreds of people had been given second chances. Hundreds of people had been able to rebuild their lives, to find housing, to find employment, to find hope. On the 5th anniversary of the shelter's expansion, the city held a ceremony to honor Emily and Maya's work. They were given community service awards. They were recognized for their dedication, their innovation, their compassion. As they accepted the awards, standing together on the stage. Emily thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago. The woman in the corporate job. The woman who'd been lost and searching for meaning. That woman felt like a stranger now. That woman had been transformed by one moment of kindness, by one person who'd seen her and helped her. And now, Emily was the one helping others. Now, Emily was the one showing people that second chances were possible. Now, Emily was the one believing in people's potential, even when they didn't believe in themselves. She looked over at Maya, and Maya smiled at her. They didn't need words. They understood each other completely. They understood what they'd built together. They understood the journey they'd been on. After the ceremony, they went back to the shelter. They walked through the hallways, past the sleeping quarters, past the dining room, past the offices. They walked past the photos on the wall, the success stories, the people who'd been helped, the lives that had been changed. And there, in the center of the wall, was still that photo of Maya. But now beside it was a photo of Emily and Maya together on their wedding day. And beside that was a photo of the two of them at the shelter's expansion ceremony. And beside that was a photo of them receiving the Community Service Award. The wall told their story. The wall showed their journey from that moment on the street corner to this moment, standing together in the shelter they'd helped build. "We did it," Maya said, her arm around Emily's waist. "We did," Emily agreed. "We really did." They stood there in the shelter, surrounded by the evidence of their work, surrounded by the lives they'd touched, surrounded by the community they'd built. And they knew that this was just the beginning. There was still so much work to be done. There were still so many people who needed help. There were still so many second chances to be given. But they were ready. Together, they were ready for whatever came next. Emily and Maya sat in their home office, looking at the acceptance letter from the publisher. Their book, Second Chances, A Story of Love, Homelessness, and Transformation, had been accepted for publication. The book told their story, the moment they met, the journey they'd taken, the obstacles they'd overcome, the life they'd built together. It wasn't just their story, though. It was also the stories of the hundreds of residents they'd worked with, the staff members who dedicated their lives to this work, the community members who'd supported their mission. "I can't believe this is really happening," Maya said, holding the letter. "We did it," Emily said. "We actually did it." The book would be published in 6 months. They'd already been invited to speak at universities, at conferences, at community organizations. Their story was going to reach people all over the country. Their story was going to inspire people to care, to help, to believe in second chances. But more importantly, the proceeds from the book would go to the shelter. The shelter had expanded again, opening a second location across town. They'd hired more staff. They'd developed more programs. They'd helped more people. Emily and Maya had also become advocates for policy change. They'd testified before the city council about the need for affordable housing. They'd worked with state legislators to pass laws that would help homeless individuals. They'd become voices for the voiceless, using their platform to push for systemic change. But at the end of the day, what mattered most to them was the work they did every day at the shelter. It was the residents they helped. It was the lives they touched. It was the second chances they gave. Emily thought about that day 10 years ago when she'd been lost on the street corner. She thought about how a simple act of kindness had changed everything. She thought about how one person's compassion had rippled outward, touching hundreds of lives, transforming a community. She looked at Maya, the woman she loved, the woman who'd saved her life in so many ways. She thought about how grateful she was for that moment. She thought about how grateful she was for this life they'd built together. "I love you," Emily said. "I love you too," Maya replied. And as they sat together in their home office, looking at the acceptance letter for their book, they knew that their story was far from over. They knew that there were still more chapters to write, more lives to touch, more second chances to give. But they also knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. They would face it with love, with commitment, with the knowledge that together they could change the world, one person at a time.